I mean, awful is probably too a mild word, yeah, so probably even worse than awful, but yeah, I guess the rook endgame was an obvious draw, but somehow I mixed up things. Okay, probably rook d8 was the move instead of what I have done.
White's king is coming.
Oh no.
The black king easily able to step back and guard that pawn. It does look like Caruana, he knows no more chances.
Also, I learned from my mistake, which is not to play 1e4 against Maxim.
Then we are now joined by Magnus Carlsen. How frustrating is that final game?
Yeah, I blundered and he played well.
Yeah.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Well, oh. I thought it was a joke. Yep. All right, Magnus Carlsen. He's frustrated then.
My name is Sebastian Mihailov, and as always, it's gonna be a pleasure for me to take you through the game of the Crypto Cup. So in this game, we'll take a look at Wesley So with the white pieces against the world champion. The game starts out with 1e4, e5, knight of 3, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop c5. Standard Italian here with c5 and knight of 6 until d4, until Wesley strikes in the center with the move d4. Not so popular at the top level, as it's well known that black is doing absolutely fine, so it's not really such a dangerous weapon, since the play becomes more forced and it's not so easy to get an advantage, to say the least. But it can lead to very interesting positions after e takes d4 and now e5, which is Wesley's weapon in his chessable course, and certainly can be a nasty surprise weapon, because there are quite a few things to remember here for black. So d5 has to be play a counter attack in the center, attacking the bishop. So the bishop moves and the knight moves as well. And you can see now that the knight is supported by a pawn, meaning that it's much better than playing knight e4 directly, of course. So white regains the pawn, bishop e6, knight c3, developing the knight, castles, and bishop e3. This is a logical move, defending the pawn on d4. This is kind of also a usual spot for black to attack, as he's going to play bishop g4 at some point, pinning the knight on f3, meaning that the pawn on d4 will be targeted and making bishop e3 a logical approach. And indeed, bishop g4 is on the table here. So Wesley plays queen c2. It's an interesting move. Sort of wants black to take here, so he can get an open g-file. And honestly, these pawns are much better than what they look. And than how they look. They can just support the center with moves like f4, and even eventually move to f5, f6, and create problems for black. So Magnus, he does not want to take. He plays bishop f5, and now Wesley's point is that the bishop is slightly worse than f5 than a g4. So now he plays queen b3. Instead of playing queen b3 right after bishop g4. Magnus feels like he doesn't have any pressure against d4 any longer, and also that his bishop is he doesn't do too much because it's hitting the pawn. So he decides to move the knight so he can play c6, support the pawn on d5 while also moving the bishop if necessary. Wesley castles, c6 by Magnus, bishop e2 from Wesley, and rook b8. So the point of this move is that Magnus defends the pawn in b7, so he can play bishop c7 and later start opening the position with f6. And if he manages to play f6, all of his pieces will all of a sudden come into life, which will create some powerful threats against Wesley's position. So Wesley gotta be a little bit careful about that. He plays knight a4, a great move. Bishop c7, and now knight h4, attacking the bishop. And another thing is that when the bishop moves, we can even play f3, f4 as well, being a nice plan in the position. f4, for example, which supports the pawn on e5, will keep white's powerful center. So Magnus thinks it's finally time to play f6. He's sort of forced to do so as well, because if he doesn't do it, then f3 will trap the knight on e4. So he sort of has to do it. So bishop f3 is played. The bar is not a fan. I do think it's very, very logical, although a move like f4 is good too. b5 comes, the knight has to move. Knight takes, and e takes f6. A brave decision by Wesley, but albeit also a bit surprising, because it allows black to open a position. It opens up the diagonal, and maybe it was better to just take and keep the pawn on e5, not allowing this diagonal to be opened. But Wesley, he takes. Bishop e4 is played by Magnus. He wants to trade another piece. B takes c3, supports opponent e4. Magnus throws in queen d6, which threatens checkmate, which Wesley defends. Bishop takes f3, and now Wesley wants to trade another piece with bishop f4. Queen takes f6, bishop takes e7. So what has happened now is that there are opposite color bishops, which is an advantage to the attacker. However, Wesley, he decides to get rid of the bishop because he doesn't want black to create problems on the light squares, which does make a lot of sense. So he gets rid of it and plays queen b4, which is a little bit inaccurate actually. You gotta be careful, because if Magnus is able to just push this pawn to h3, it's gonna be made on g2. So he needs to be careful. I think a move like bishop d6 would have been better, and then simply maybe try to get rid of the knight here, and create some annoying pressure. And there's even a draw line here after knight f5 takes knight h4, and he's threatening mate. And if white decides to take, it's gonna be a perpetual with queen g4, queen f3, for example. But he goes queen b4. Magnus jumps to f5, improves his knight, queen c5, but now it's becoming awfully dangerous. Just 2 moves after it was entirely equal. Look at the bar, it's going all the way down, and that is because after rook f7, black has a really powerful attack, and there's nothing Wesley can do about it in order to survive. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, black's attack becomes far too much for white to handle, and therefore Wesley had to play queen b3 in order to play queen d1 and trade off this annoying queen on f3 to diminish black's powerful attack. But instead, after queen c5, rook f7, the attack is too dangerous, and the plan that Magnus finds is really powerful, and it's the plan that I just mentioned a move ago. h4, h5, with the idea of pushing the pawn all the way to h3. And Wesley tries to prevent that by playing h3 himself, but he doesn't stop Magnus. He plays h4 anyway, and now Wesley's king is becoming opened. So Wesley tried queen takes e6, but after the correct and only move that wins, I might add, knight takes g3, black is completely winning. And the thing is, h takes g3 does not work because of f takes g3, and now the queen is under attack. And the difference here is that if I play f takes g3 now, Magnus can simply play queen takes f1, and it's gonna be mate. Even queen e3, which is kind of the move that I would play because it's prettier, but both moves lead to mate. And after knight takes g3, bishop takes g3, h takes g3, there is not much Wesley can do here, because Magnus is threatening g takes f2 and also g2, and both moves are just as lethal. And Wesley moves the rook out of the way, but now g2, and Wesley cannot move the rook on f1, because then the pawn on f2 will hang, followed by a promotion, and black simply wins. A terrific attack by the World Champion, which shows the importance of having pieces around your king. And the reason why the attack worked is because Wesley's queen was absent and could not deal with Magnus's forces. So a terrific display and brilliantly played by the World Champion.
But Magnus blocking the white bishop. Is that just game over?
It is
3
totally
seconds,
game
2
over.
seconds.
There's nothing to be done
1
apart from
second.
losing a piece.
Magnus wins.
Wow!